You know, it's kind of wild to think that a government report from 50 years ago, probably typed up on an actual typewriter, could have anything to say about our world of AI and automation. But it does. In fact, we're about to see how a crisis brewing in the skies back in the 70s is a dead ringer for some of the biggest challenges we're facing right now.
Okay, so let's set the scene. The year is 1972. America is on top of the world, wrapping up the Apollo moon missions. But while all eyes were on outer space, a totally different kind of space race was heating up right here at home. Our skies were just getting packed with planes. So NASA got the call to look into it, and what they came up with was this report, all about the human factors of air traffic control.
And here's exactly why they were so worried. Just look at these numbers. They were forecasting that the number of flights would more than double in just 10 years. I mean, from about 20 million to over 40 million. The entire system that kept people safe in the air was stretched to its absolute limit. And the scariest part? The weakest link in the whole chain wasn't the technology, it wasn't the radar, it was the people.
So, let's dive into that. I mean, the whole promise of the jet age was here, right? You could fly anywhere, but the system to actually manage all those planes, it just wasn't keeping up. The controllers were stuck using gear that was getting seriously, and I mean dangerously, outdated for the amount of traffic they were juggling. And look, the report was, well, it was brutally honest. They didn't pull any punches. Right there in the summary. They just come out and say it. The system had, and I'm quoting here, failed to keep pace with the requirements placed upon it. It was falling behind, plain and simple. And when you're talking about airplanes, falling behind can have absolutely catastrophic results.
This is really the key takeaway. For years, everyone just assumed the fix was, better technology, faster radar, better radios. But what this report did was totally shift the focus. The investigators realized the problem wasn't the hardware, it was the software problem, the human software, the people operating the machines. And that brings us right to the heart of this entire investigation. For the first time, really, the focus wasn't just on the blinking lights in the machines, it was on the actual people staring at those screens.
So what exactly is human factors? Well, think of it like this. It's the science of making things for actual humans. It's about designing systems that work with our brains and our bodies, our strengths and our weaknesses, instead of fighting against them. You fit the job to the person, you don't try to cram the person into the job. Okay, so to get their arms around this massive problem, the researchers broke it down into three simple, logical parts. First, staffing. How do we even find the right people for this job? Then, training. Once we find them, how do we get them ready? And finally, operations. What's it actually like for them on a day-to-day basis? And once they started looking at the whole system through this new human-focused lens, oh boy, they found huge, deep-rooted problems in every single one of those areas. Cracks were showing everywhere, and it was threatening the safety of the entire system.
All right, let's start with staffing. It's kind of like trying to build a championship sports team, but your whole scouting department is broken. That's basically what was going on. The tests they were using to pick controllers, turns out they weren't very good at predicting who would actually be good at the job. And to make it worse, people just didn't move around. So you get these huge imbalances, with super busy hubs like Chicago being desperately understaffed, while quieter airports had more controllers than they needed. And this quote they pulled from another study just nails it. The whole selection process was flawed. It wasn't finding people with the right skills, and maybe more importantly, it wasn't finding people with the staying power, that mental toughness to handle one of the most stressful jobs on the planet. I mean, this is a job where one bad day can have unbelievable consequences. And get this, we can actually see the tests they were giving people. Look at what they're focusing on. Arithmetic, abstract reasoning, spatial relations. Now, sure, that stuff is important, but what about making a life-or-death decision in a split second? What about communication under extreme pressure? None of that was being tested. They were measuring the wrong things, and that was a huge, huge problem. Okay, so on to problem number 2, training. Imagine cramming for a huge final exam, but then you don't actually take the test for a year or more. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's exactly what was happening. New controllers would learn all this stuff at the academy, and then they'd get to their post and maybe not use those specific skills for months, even years. By the time they needed them, skill decay had kicked in. They'd basically forgotten it all. And there was pretty much zero simulation training, which today is just unthinkable for a job this critical. And this one number just says it all. 36 months. 3 years. That's how long it could take for a new trainee to be considered fully qualified. Think about that.
3 years between learning something and being expected to be a master of it. The whole training pipeline was just incredibly long and inefficient.
And finally, that brings us to operations, what life was actually like in the control tower. The gear they used was clunky. It wasn't intuitive. They called it a poor man-machine interface. Today, we just call it terrible user experience. You combine that frustrating equipment with the constant, immense stress of the job, and you've got a recipe for burnout. These controllers were pushed to their physical and mental breaking points every single day.
And this wasn't just in their heads, It was real, physical, and measurable. The report pointed to studies that showed during a busy shift, a controller's heart rate would shoot up. Their bodies were flooded with the chemical byproducts of stress. It was like their internal fight-or-flight alarm was just stuck in the on position for hours at a time. But here's the thing. This report wasn't just about pointing out all the problems. It was also about finding a solution. And the solution they came up with was honestly way ahead of its time. And it all came back to focusing on the person. So, the authors needed an example to follow, right? A model for how to run a super complex, super high-stakes operation. And lucky for them, the best example in the entire world was right under their own roof, at NASA. They just had to look at a different kind of control room.
And this was the big aha moment. They looked to NASA's Mission Control in Houston, the team that put a man on the moon. What was their secret? Simulation. Constant, intense, realistic simulation. They practiced for every single thing that could possibly go wrong. And the report basically said, hey, we need to be doing that. There was, and I love this phrase, undoubtedly much to be learned from such experience. So they laid out this whole new game plan. Step 1, truly understand what a controller actually does. Step 2, build better tests based on that understanding. Step 3, figure out why skills decay and how to stop it. Step 4, simulate, simulate, simulate. And step 5, design equipment that actually helps people do their jobs, not hinder them. I mean, that sounds like a blueprint for a Silicon Valley startup, but this was written back in 1972.
And we're not talking about vague ideas here. These guys were serious. The report was filled with detailed action plans, like this Gantt chart right here. This lays out a whole 2-year project just for figuring out better ways to measure proficiency. This wasn't a wish list, it was a ready-to-go roadmap for completely overhauling the system.
Okay, so why are we talking about this? Why does a report about 1970s air traffic controllers matter to us today? Well, it matters because if you really look at the problems they were facing, they're the same problems we're facing now, just with different technology.
I mean, think about it. Burnout and high-stakes jobs like medicine or software development? Check. Anxiety about automation and AI changing our careers? Yep, that's there. The everyday frustration of using software that's just badly designed? For sure. And the constant pressure to keep learning just to stay relevant? That's the big one. These aren't new problems. They were grappling with the very same things 50 years ago.
And that leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? As we race ahead, building ever more complex AI and automated systems, this dusty old report is kind of like a ghost from the past, tapping us on the shoulder. It's asking a simple question. Are we paying enough attention to the human factor? Are we remembering the person in the loop? Because if we forget, we are absolutely doomed to make the same mistakes all over again.